If I went attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, what would you say is wrong there?
It's just factually incorrect.
Yeah.
The words that are used are factually incorrect.
When I wrote the book, I was inundated with mums and women particularly going, I think I've got ADHD, but I don't want the label. They felt that somehow that was going to hold them back.
Wow, that's super successful. You've got a superpower, you wrote your book. Actually, I would suggest that you probably had to work really, really hard to get to there.
And I would say I would never have been able to write that book had I not understood that I had ADHD.
So you could look at that and think, wow, she's achieved so much. Semi-finals of MasterChef. But actually, the nervous breakdown I had almost at that point, if I wasn't thrown off at that point that I would have, self-destructed.
So for me, it's the education piece. It's that kid that gets diagnosed, girl or boy, that dare I say, is not being diagnosed, not even being educated about that.
Suddenly you have answers, suddenly you have explanations, and for children that's like, now we can get you on a track where the trajectories and outcomes can be so different.
Kim, Vanessa, Phil, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Why are we all here?
I think we're all here because we've got like minds. You and I have joined up on a kind of mission to raise a real mission awareness of what can be done for ADHD. Got these two fantastic ladies with us because of lived experience. And when we were talking about what we would do and how we would do it, we kind of wanted someone with a profile in social media and out there. And obviously you've got your TV work and what have you. And somebody who's got a profile but in the ADHD community, and bring those two together, because we suspect you've lived parallel lives and parallel journeys and it'd be good to share that and see what we can pull out of it. So I've answered the question. I'm going to chuck it right back at you. What's motivated you to be here?
Connecting up people that have got the lived experience, and also yourself, me, that can actually join people up to then go on a mission to try and enforce change and make an impact out there that I know probably frustrates the hell out of you both, where you're shouting, you've got the TV, you've got the books, you're putting stuff out there, but who's listening? So I think that's where we can open up, from this conversation.
Yeah, 100%.
We've got to start the conversation off somehow. If I went attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, what would you say is wrong there in that title?
Well, the attention deficit, isn't it? Of the fact that, and that's always been, I think, my problem is it's just too much attention. I just get overwhelmed with the amount of information that comes into me. And for me, and I think a lot of clients and people that I see, is that it's the amount that we pick up that is unspoken. So the empathy and the amount of tension we can pick up. I can walk into a room and the lights, the noise, the people, the emotions, the stuff that's going on unspoken, I get it all. And that's overwhelming.
You were nodding, you nearly nodded your head off there.
Yeah, because it's just factually incorrect. The words that are used are factually incorrect. And also it's society's perception of those words. So when you think of hyperactivity, you actually think of it physically manifested, right? And you think about somebody jumping up and down, running about. And actually what isn't apparent is the hyperactivity is all in my brain. So right now you've asked a question, but I'm thinking about so many things. And actually that's not a deficit. I think if you're only thinking a single thought, that's a deficit, because effectively you have the ability, the mind is limitless. So why can't I be singing a song in my head, thinking about what I'm having for dinner, thinking about what I need to do tonight, thinking about my son who's in the room next door, thinking about the next feed, answering your question, and lots of other things. I could be here all day talking about the things that are going on in my brain.
All at the same time.
And how does that resonate with you then?
Well, I think that as well, the hyperactivity is the misleading part, isn't it? Because everybody thinks, speak to anybody about ADHD, and I think a problem that people have is the misconception of the hyperactivity. So someone will turn around and say, I've got ADHD. And someone goes, you've not got ADHD. You sit still, or you've just sat and talked to me through this conversation. But the cognitive hyperactivity is firing through their brain. But also, I think as well, and this is just my opinion, but like I say, like a visceral hyperactivity as well, like this feeling, and this sort of buzzing sometimes I get in my body. I used to think I'd lie in bed and I'd think that it was like the washing machine's on downstairs. And I'd think, what's going on? And I'd say to my husband, have you put the washing machine on? He's like, no. And I'm lying there and I'm like, can you feel that? And he's like, no, go to sleep. But my body is like buzzing. It's like there's just an energy in it that's.
But if you harness that, that's an absolute superpower. And the last word, disorder. I mean, where did that come from? Because you're instantly labelling people that they've got something that's not normal. What is normal? And therefore, has that created a lot of the stigma that goes? Because from a coaching point of view, particularly, you see people that feel like they're removed from what is normal.
The disorder part is, so I wrote a book. When I wrote the book, I was inundated with mums and women, particularly going, I think I've got ADHD, but I don't want the label because it's a disorder. Or I think my child has got ADHD, but I don't want them to have the label because they felt that somehow that was going to hold them back, which I just think is so sad because I know that actually when you have that diagnosis and you get your diagnosis, suddenly you have answers. Suddenly you have explanations. And for children, that's like, now we can get you on a track where the trajectories and outcomes can be so different. So I think the disorder part for me is really just misleading and does do a lot of damage.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think people are just still a bit funny about
what would
the
you
word.
call it? If it was being named now, with the understanding, the maturity that comes with the journey that countless people have had to go through in a negative sort of things, what would you call it?
It's interesting because ultimately I don't think the label really matters. You could call it anything, but what I disagree with is when the label doesn't match what it is, right? And actually,
if it's trying to.
Correct.
Yeah.
And actually, it's attention to many things for me, all at once. And actually, I think a lot of it comes down to society's perception because it also ties into disability. And there's a lot of people with ADHD that will wholly believe that for them, their ADHD is fully disabling. But then there's other people where they also experience that, but they don't want the label of disability. And that's solely down to society's perception of disability. So it's a difficult one. So in answer to that question, very long-winded ADHD answer, you can call it anything you want.
But I like that because for someone looking in and trying to understand this and naturally curious, the name is relevant.
Does it?
Go back to chats we've had before where it's actually about the mission is to actually try and help and create awareness that if you have got ADHD, this is how people will behave, or this is what needs to be implemented. And that could be from education, that could be in the workplace. And again, going back to conversations we've had, the whole like fitting into society and those that don't fall into the crime system, if you like.
Yeah.
So in context of your sort of parallel journeys, if you like, what's been the journey if you did sort of want to be outspoken and share your lived experiences?
Well, for a long time, I didn't think I had ADHD because, again, perception. And at the time, my autism was primary, the leading diagnosis, effectively. And as I kind of thought ADHD was just naughty little boys, I don't have that. I'm not hyperactive, and I fell into believing, because I am also autistic, that factually I probably can't fit that label.
So you're looking to conform at that point, which is how society trains us, right? Where do I fit? And you don't feel like you fit.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I'm such a great high masker. Like nobody knows the internal hyperactivity that goes on in my brain.
And that turmoil will manifest not in those 4 words of that label. What manifests most for you in real life with your ADHD, do you think?
I think it's been the cognitive hyperactivity, the overthinking, but again, the other side of it is the ideas, the creativity, but for me, definitely that sort of the hyperactivity. When I was younger, the impulsivity as well, the attention and so, okay, let's talk about attention deficit. I do sometimes struggle to pay attention, and you could say that, sometimes I'll be sat there and next thing, like I was worried a minute ago because I was thinking, I don't know what the question was now. I was just thinking that, and it wasn't that
the brain's moved on.
It's not that I'm paying attention, it's that I'm listening here and I'm thinking about this and suddenly it's like, yep, that's gone.
But that's stuff that can get you into trouble at school.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
not paying attention. Well, I was about 30 seconds ago, but I've moved on, and then it gets you into trouble in the workplace, could cause you to be in trouble at work, get fired and so on. So if that's not understood, and then like you used the term of masking, you're trying to conform. If that's an education piece that comes from the top down, so that actually you've got ADHD, so that means I can understand, I can be compassionate, you can be yourself. Surely that's a marriage of better output.
Yeah, but also I think there's just a misunderstanding that there is a deficit of attention, where actually, if you look at it for what it is, it's that we have interest-led brains. And, you know, at that time, maybe in a maths class, that's not of interest to me.
Yeah.
And if you spin that to be positive, maybe I don't need to be in a maths class, and maybe I should be doing a class on something that I am interested in, and I will excel in that.
That's gold,
Yeah.
what you just said. I've never, ever heard, 22 years, I've never heard we have an interest-led brain. I'm going to steal that off you with a huge amount of pride. Because
Should have trademarked it.
Don't. But people talk about you get a higher level of dopamine, which overcomes some of the sort of processes that need a bit more dopamine if you're interested, if you're motivated. The interest-led brain, we're automatically, it's a great expression. So if you're not interested, you know, experience tells me it's a focus capability. And if you're boring me, I'm not going to focus. So when John was asking a question and you didn't listen, you told me a great amount then about what John was doing in terms of boring you. No, but if you've not got the interest-led focus, you're going to focus on something. So it's not an attention deficit; it's a focus not being aimed at you know, you're throwing the dart, but it's not going on in where you want it. The dart's going somewhere else, isn't it?
And why is that a bad thing? You know, we always have this phrase, jack of all trades, master of none. I'd rather be the master of one, right? Yeah. I think that's the most positive thing to come out of my ADHD, for example. I need to learn to unmask and shed the societal rules of, I work this corporate job, which is slightly soul destroying. Sorry if you're watching. And that was part of my experience on trying to get on MasterChef, because actually my passion is cooking. Why did I not follow that at 16 or 17? You know, why? Because of societal expectations. You should go to university. My parents paid for private education, so therefore I need to do something with it, you know? All of these things that are now coming to light. And I also want to go back to your point, I think, when you said about people receiving a diagnosis, and you're going to be very versed on this. You don't always need the diagnosis. Sometimes you just need the light bulb in your brain to go off and be like, hang on a minute, I relate to this.
Yeah.
That's me. And
I'm not alone.
Yes. And, you know, we have to think about accessibility to all. And unfortunately, it's not always for everybody.
Before we filmed, that was a real, I saw you get really animated about that. Both of you actually, like, thank God someone's doing something about this and so on. And we've just had conversations about bringing people together and aligning. But why is there not more being done? And is there a figurehead? Is there a sort of a public eye person that you can relate to? Or is that really missing at the moment in terms of championing how you're actually feeling?
Yeah, I think unfortunately what we are seeing now is celebrities with high profile names that have ADHD, but they're not relatable. You know, they are celebrities that have funding behind them, that have big profiles. And I just want to see an average, everyday body like me, you know, that doesn't have the funding, isn't on TV, doesn't have access to all the things that celebrities do. And also, as somebody who's an ethnic minority, my culture doesn't really accept certain diagnosis. You know, autism is a big one. You know, that is very much a dirty word. ADHD is still, hang on a minute, what does that even mean? You know, I have a lot of family members that will reject the ADHD even though they have it themselves. Yeah, you know, and it you know, it comes from somewhere. It always does. And what I want to see is more people in the public eye that look like me, that are from Corridon, like me. You know, just everyday places that aren't privileged. And
relatability.
Yeah, that's the word.
So take that forward. You've written the book. Just give me one paragraph. What's your book all? I know, but what's your book all about?
The book it's called Square Pegs, a book of self-discovery for women with ADHD. And it literally is about the amount of women, you know, I've coached in various forms for 20 years. Not all of that time has been ADHD. But now I look back 20 years, I'm like, oh yeah, I have been coaching ADHD for 20 years. I just haven't known. And over that time, I've seen so many women masking, that will come and that will have tried to spend their whole life fitting in, the whole life being part of something, but never quite feeling that they did fit in, never quite feeling that they got it right. And when you get this late diagnosis, the stages that you go through, the validation, one of the things is the conversations with families. You know, clients say to me, you know, I've got my diagnosis, and they want to run and tell the world. They want to tell people because they finally have the answer. I was like, I know what it is now and I want to tell you. And what they get back is, you've not got ADHD. Or, oh, ADHD doesn't exist. And it's just another kicker on the journey.
You're not a boy.
Yeah, exactly. You're not, you know, and so the book was really for those women, and also to change the conversation for the next generation of those women. You know, I'm a mum, I'm a grandmother. ADHD is highly heritable. I'm really passionate that my daughter and my granddaughter are not afraid of a label, that actually they see that they can be themselves, and the amazing opportunities. And like you say, it's not just about the famous people, but it's also the entrepreneurs, the business owners, the creators that do these phenomenal things. And we don't often hear that side of it at the moment in the media very often.
I counter that in one sense, though, because it does feel like there's a lot of entrepreneurs and ultimately successful people that are ADHD, autistic, dyslexic. So actually, I'm not trying to contradict at all.
No.
But that these people, dare I say, wouldn't have been talking about that tenure. They wouldn't have attributed any of that success to. Whereas just in recent weeks almost, James Watt, Alex Partridge, of course, the Potato podcast, these are all people that now associate that with their success. Is that a narrative that's changing?
Yeah, and that is changing. And I think that what's changing is the media, because what at the moment, though, the media would much rather portray the downside of ADHD or the
extremes. It's very
the celebrity side of it.
Traditional, these things, the trends take time to change. It's just really what we're trying to achieve here.
Yeah.
Right?
It's taking a lot to unlock the media.
Yeah.
And 22 years ago, when I first started in this work, we were clambering to find celebrities that had it, to change that profile.
Yeah.
That you can actually be successful and have ADHD. And I look at both of you and your examples of how you can be successful and have ADHD. And you mentioned the word superpower. I kind of balk at superpower, because you may achieve and you may have that ability to focus on your cooking because you get really excited about that. That's what you want to be, and focus on your coaching. But that you must have had to focus to write the book.
Oh God.
Yeah, but you got there, and everyone could see, wow, that's super successful. You've got a superpower. You wrote your book. Actually, I would suggest that you probably had to work really, really hard to get to there.
And I would say I would never have been able to write that book had I not understood that I had ADHD.
Yeah.
So it changed everything, because now I was like, okay, Kim, this is not going to work how you've always thought it's going to work. And all the times that you've tried and not got there, you're going to have to do certain things. And so I very much set my life up to be able to do the book, you know, and I created some scaffolding around me and certain things that I needed and structures. Whereas before I didn't know that. So I would, you know, be like, I'll sit here and tell you I'm going to write a book. I might even write a few chapters. And then life would get in the way, or something else would come along, or it's just hard to sit and write a book.
You've done it. You've done it. What about you with your sort of your secondary career, if you will? You know, you built. How have you managed to focus your mind on that? Because obviously you've got autism and ADHD, so maybe you lean into your autism to deliver that part.
Well, it also goes back to my little copyrighted phrase, interest-driven brain.
Yeah.
It's something that I'm interested
My
in.
copyrighted phrase.
You know, it's something, if it's of interest to me, I will excel in it. But that is, it's not portraying the full story. Correct. Which is effectively what you're trying to say. That, yes, I got to almost the final 6 on MasterChef, right? Semi-finalist, did that break me? So you can look at that and think, wow, she's achieved so much. Semi-finals of MasterChef. But actually, the nervous breakdown I had almost at that point, if I wasn't thrown off at that point that I would have, you know, self-destructed. So there's pros and cons to everything. And actually going back to your point about the celebrities and the entrepreneurs that are coming out, actually both names, ironically, that you've mentioned are very middle-class white males. You know,
I thought that when I said that, actually.
Yeah. Where are the females? Where are the ones that are from different minorities and different backgrounds and socioeconomic backgrounds? And actually, irrespective of who we're talking about, we can see their successes, but who's talking about the bit in between where they're not having a nervous breakdown and struggling? they're not really successful, but it's that journey. And I think that's the key bit, which no one is covering. No media. They just want to hear the wonderful successes or the terrible people that are really, really struggling, you know. At the
What's the role of media then, do you think, going forward?
Good question. Hopefully to portray ADHD in a more accurate light. And I say that from a factual point of view, but also from a more diverse point of view.
It's no surprise that as we've asked you questions, you've both joined, you've never met before, and yet you've got extremely common sets of circumstances and the challenges and what have you. And that's the message, isn't it? That there's that middle ground. And to get to where you got to a MasterChef, to get to where you've written your book, you've had all that scaffold, all that pain, all that. You've had to find your focus. You've had to channel that. It's not easy, is it? And that's what makes me balk about the superpower thing, because we can find that interest-led piece, but you've got to work bloody hard to get.
I think where the superpower thing comes for me is that both you guys have got a long journey in terms of a period of your life before you almost unravelled, unmasked, marinated in it, got comfortable, and then started championing. So for me, it's the education piece. It's that kid that gets diagnosed, girl or boy, that dare I say is not being diagnosed, not even being educated about that, and then can be allowed to feel they have a superpower. That's me making the point more.
I think if you are speaking
rather than feeling they've got a disorder, shame, because that's what aligns us all, right?
Absolutely,
You've
got
had to go through
remove shame.
Yeah, so that's that. Just elaborating on that, it's like knowing that these kids, it's like great, we can work with you now. Actually, now let me help you.
Yeah.
And that's missing.
I think with the children, I think absolutely, like I always say, I'm 51 years old, I'm menopausal. Don't tell me I've got a superpower. When I've booked myself into the wrong hotel, as happened the other day, I've booked myself into an hour and a half hotel from where I should be. I can't find my keys. I'm running in and out of the house, checking where my glasses are, and they're on my head. And you're telling, it doesn't feel like a superpower.
Oh, I get it.
But I think what you've just said so well is like, what we see is you semi-finalist on MasterChef, like wow. But underneath the price or the cost for you to get there. And I always think about energy as well. That's the part of ADHD that is, the energy and the emotion side is the stuff that is we're becoming more and more aware of, but the burnout and the exhaustion to get to these places whereby, you're so stimulated, the executive functioning, there's so many parts that need to be moved for you to get to that point. It's exhausting. And so the price I think that we pay is great, is really great.
And ignorance on my part, but genuinely interested in asking the question, is there medication you can take to help with that? Is there mindfulness you can practice? Once you now know that, how do you manage it to try and calm those voices and those craziness in your head?
Well, I think medication is definitely part of the solution. If you can have medication and it works for you, then fantastic. But I also think that it's a journey, isn't it, to knowing yourself. So the educational piece. I think the expectations you put upon ourselves, like my expectations of myself have really changed. So whereas before, and I don't know if it's different with you, but like I would push and push and push and push and push, and then I would be on the floor, complete heap. And I'd think, what's wrong with me? Why aren't other people struggling like this? Why is it always me that struggles like this? And I didn't know that it wasn't a level playing field. I thought we were all in this together. And then suddenly you're like, oh, so now I've changed my expectations of like,
that's a mindset shift, because we do compare ourselves to others, and social media is a killer for that, right?
Yeah.
So actually, it's a mindset that you educate yourself to then go, stop thinking about what they're doing or what I feel I should do. This is what I'm going to try.
And you said I got to the semi-finals of MasterChef rather than I didn't get to the final. And the old me would have been oh, I missed that bit.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I was like crying through the way home. And then I basically had to take myself to the Maldives because I didn't want to cook for the rest of the year. So
how did you go?
I said to my husband, literally, we're going on a very expensive holiday. I don't care if we can't afford it, but I just need good food and basically, for the rest of the year. Yeah. But actually, going back to your medication point, I have a very unique view, and this is very, I guess, unique to me and my feelings. I don't take medication. Yeah. I'm not anti-medication, but actually I feel that great if medication works for you, but it's also part of the problem in effect, because it's learning that actually the multiple thoughts in your brain isn't a good thing, or you need to change that, or maybe you want to change that, and that's fine. And I specifically, and I think this is where it gets complicated because my autism is leading here, I need to feel things. I need to feel what I'm feeling to understand. My brain needs to process this. And that's with everything. You know, I just gave birth 11 weeks ago, and the doctors thought I was mad because I said, I don't want any medication. I don't want anything. I don't want an epidural. I don't want painkillers. I don't want anything. They were like, you know, you don't get a medal for this. And I was like, but I need this because I need to feel this. And there's an assumption that, you know, because, for example, I'm autistic, I need rigidity, I need a routine, that suddenly a C-section would be the best option for me because you're scheduled at 3 o'clock, at 3:20 you'll have a baby. And I was like, that is my worst nightmare, because how are you explaining to me that I can't feel anything and then suddenly I'm handed a baby?
Yeah, so
like,
where's the connection?
how does that make sense?
Yeah.
So ADHD medication will not work for someone like me, because all of the chatter in my brain I've learnt to love. And actually, that's taken me... Yes. And it is chaotic at times. However, I'm putting in the work now to try and learn to embrace that and learn to work with it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I have a husband who doesn't have autism but has very male, stereotypical ADHD, and it presents in the very textbook style.
Yeah.
And actually, both of us together is, you see both ends of that spectrum, you know, pun fully intended here. It's fascinating. And both of us share the same view that actually we're going to make it work.
Yeah.
Our brain is our brain. How that works together, it's chaos, let me tell you. But it is what it is.
The key, one of the keys we talk about clinically is the level of impairment. Okay, so it's not having ADHD or not. It's not a binary thing.
Yeah.
It's whatever the life, the circumstances, the construct around you. Talked about scaffolding to get your book, and people may partially understand, but you'll have had support mechanisms. You'll have people around you doing stuff.
I had a team to help me. I had someone that had deadlines, and
So the impairment that you might have been was negated by having the scaffolding. Whether or not you're impaired is you are able to manage your level of impairment with your lifestyle and tolerate what you have you've decided to cope with, to live with your partner. It's when it's not tolerable and it's not livable with, we need to look at other interventions, and that's why everybody's different. But the scaffolding that you clearly provide for each other, the team that provided scaffolding and support for you, I genuinely would say to you both, you're probably very privileged to be able to have that, because there's many people who A, don't understand themselves, and B, therefore don't have people around them that can provide that.
I think with medication as well, so I used to be the same as you, like my children still going at me like I wouldn't let them have Cowpole, I wouldn't have anything. I was anti-medication. We didn't have anything. They had to be, you know, I got told off once. I took them to the hospital and they were like, why have you not brought this child before? And I'm like, well, it's a fever, they'll be all right. You know, I was very anti-medication, but I'd been coaching a long time. And then when ADHD came in, this realisation that actually quite a few of my clients who were all high-flying, burnt out, exhausted women who were overwhelmed, who were struggling with anxiety, struggling with their confidence, struggling to just keep it all together, perimenopausal. And I watched them, I'd known them before, and I watched them go onto medication, and suddenly everything that we'd spoken, they could do what they wanted to do. They could think, I want to do this. This is my goal. This is my aim. And they could, and it happened. And actually, quite a few of them didn't stay on medication for long. They actually, you know, you can build the structures, you can build a life that might be, I don't need medication now. And I think that it's something that can be there with other tools, you know, like self-care and exercise and looking after yourself.
I think the key there is they wanted to do something and the medication helped them to get somewhere. But actually, I view, from my perspective, because of the interest-led brain, for me, it's kind of like a litmus test, you know?
Am I interested?
Yeah. if so, that's my opportunity to say, actually, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
I'm not, and part of that is trying to unmask, because I was the yes person, the people pleaser, and then you say yes to everything, and medication makes that worse, because then you can actually do the yes to everything, and maybe you don't want to do the yes to everything. Maybe you just want to say yes to the 5 things that you like, not the 10 things, and that's where you get the burnout.
Yeah.
Right? So there's pros and cons, and actually for me, it's taking a step back to really evaluate what is going to work for me and what isn't going to work for me. And actually, over the years, getting bold enough to say no.
Yeah.
Thanks, but no.
Because you've got great perspective. Because if you, I'm sort of championing the whole being educated early. We need.
Yes.
But actually, just listening to you, what you've been through, to then have that perspective, to know how you were masked, saying yes to everything, to now being so raw and authentic and just calling anything out, which we all love. Actually, I think that's really relatable and inspiring for anyone watching and listening to this that's just trying to understand themselves, because they can actually look at the before and after. We just need to get that education piece right, so because you come through it, you are a success story.
Still working through it,
of
because I say that I have got bolder in saying no to things, but I still overcommit. So it's work in progress. That's what I can say.
Where I was going with it is that there are people that haven't come through that, the mental health crisis that we're in, and how much of this is people that just don't understand themselves. Yeah. They aren't brave enough to come to you, or haven't even thought, they don't even know you exist, because they've gone so consumed in their head, like you say, with this hyperactivity. Yeah. They've just gone into it and then created other mental health.
The other part of this, though, is that for women and those born female, that actually we know that there's a huge underdiagnosis because of the hyperactivity cognitively. So actually, we're seeing a lot more late diagnosed women than, there's always been a higher chance as a male you will be diagnosed earlier. Are you going to disagree? I didn't know if you were going to look at them.
I'm agreeing wholeheartedly. What we've done clinically is remove those barriers, and we've got 50% women and 50% men in our clinic, and 33,000 patients, and it's an even split. And I'm super proud of that.
Was that an even split if you go back a few years?
Go back to pre what we did to level the playing field.
Yeah.
It was very much a male-dominated experience.
And that's the thing.
People are still looking in schools. They're still looking for the boy throwing the chair. And unless the boy throws the chair, you can't have ADHD. And looking at both of you, you've both lived through that, haven't you?
Yeah.
You've been missed.
I was a female version of that boy, though. I was quite feisty in school, and I never threw a chair.
Kicking a table.
I was quite, but because I was a girl, that was just...
That's you being a stroppy girl. That's your emotions.
Yeah, exactly. And my puberty and all of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And every time that comes, that for me comes with a little bit of a layer of shame, because actually this is me. This is a fault in my personality and who I am. And that's the thing I think that changes when you get that diagnosis. It's like, okay, I thought this was personality traits. I thought that I was these things because, that I was rude or useless or weak or distracting or whatever I was up to at the time. And actually now I realise, oh my gosh, I had an interest-led brain that needed dopamine, it needed chemicals to get me going. And if I wasn't going to get them, I was going to get them from somewhere, and I would do something disruptive or crazy or funny or whatever that means, and then be put down. And that comes with, and as you grow up, and I'm quite a bold person, I think probably, but those layers of shame just go and go and go. And then when you get your diagnosis, you're suddenly like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing that you just talk so openly, and I'm glad you talked openly, of layers of shame. Mm-hmm. And society is constructed to allow you, who is now a successful woman, to have experienced layers of shame.
That's why I'm so passionate about it.
And that's what we're here to discuss.
Well, it's this interest-led thing that that's onto its purpose, right? Yeah. And actually that's, dare I say, what aligns us all.
Bond, isn't it?
And conscious of time here, but what can we all do to align a purpose? You've got the raw frustration, passion, you've got the business element and can do to try and help solve, and you've got the whole, who do we need to get involved in? It's what can we all do? What's the alignment of purpose there that we can move forward with? What's the change that needs to happen that we can help influence? I'm not suggesting we've got the answer, because
$1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think that
it's this, right? It's awareness. It's the lived experiences. It's the sharing, the frustration, being masked,
and
happy to be unmasked.
What you're both offering is just what you said needed to be offered. And I was delighted when you said, we don't need somebody who's lived a whole life of privilege, who's got everything and never really struggled, but wants to be on that causation. Yeah, great, do your work, great, brilliant. If I may, you are two very relatable, I nearly use the N word, normal people, but people can relate to you both. You know, yeah, absolutely. And what I think we've brought together is two fantastic people who've lived through challenge, lived through layers of shame, lived through having to find out who you are and justify that both. And you introduced, there's a whole nother conversation about race and ADHD and ethnicity and the transferability of ADHD as a badge into language, which it doesn't translate into other languages. But what you offer, I believe, is for those people who hopefully will watch this, is that relatability, and that might just inspire somebody to think differently about themselves and seek the help that they want. So, and if we got the health minister watching this, Secretary of State for Health watching this, and that, you laugh, but that's my goal.
Yeah, let's do it.
Start.
Yeah.
Now do something.
Yes.
Do something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the relatability and the relevance.
Yes.
Two incredibly relevant people that, ultimately sharing a voice, combining to see if we can conquer. So it's been great to have a conversation, guys.
Amazing.
I've loved it. Thank you.
Thank you.